Okay, so the title of my project is called Breakout, the Power of Language. And my project was kind of twofold, two parts, and I'm going to walk you through how this came about and then what my results were. So my area of focus was on the relationship between student engagement and its role in the acquisition of the skills necessary to demonstrate proficiency in the area of craft and structure of written and spoken language. And that came straight from my language arts standards. And a lot of what we do in language arts, we focus on a lot of writing and a lot of reading, but we don't have as much focus on speaking. So I wanted to include that in my research as well. And so I had two research questions. I wanted to know what impact will merging engaging kinesthetic activities with critical thinking skills have on students' ability to interpret words and phrases as they are used in text. So instead of just sitting there reading the text, I wanted my kids up, moving, and doing something with it. And if you've ever taught language arts, you know that's kind of difficult because, yeah, you have to read, but how can you engage them in other ways? And then I also wanted to know what impact, if any, does 3D model creation of student-generated imagery have on written expression? And so the research showed me that students who are engaged in their work are energized by 4 goals: success, curiosity, originality, and satisfying relationships. And so I want my students to be successful, but what I wanted to focus on was that curiosity. Middle school students are a breed of their own. I mean, they're just different. It's that awkward age, and if you've ever taught it, you know that. And if you haven't, you can take our word for it, I promise. But they're a different breed, so they're curious, and they have original ideas and quirky ideas, and so I wanted to give my kids a chance to show that. Okay, my action plan, I wanted to allow students to partake in a series of Breakout EDU games. And I'm not going to take a whole lot of time to explain that other than if you're familiar with the Breakout games that are really popular right now, that's what my kids were doing with the Breakout EDU. The difference was it's content driven. But I wanted them to have a series of those games requiring students to think critically while being engaged kinesthetically. So they're up and actually moving while thinking and interacting with that content in order to help them read and analyze clues. Additionally, they must physically manipulate locks, riddles, and the physical space around them. I wanted to empower students with the skills necessary to practice reflecting and analyzing the impact word choice has on understanding, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and then visualize the impact of their own written words by using 3 doodler pens to create 3D models of imagery that they compose when writing their own poems. So for my project evaluation, I did a questionnaire with my kids. I used Google Forms to better understand their personal viewpoints regarding those 4 goals. We did a pre-assessment, and then we did a post-assessment. Okay, so the resources needed, I purchased 1 Breakout EDU kit, and so this is a picture of everything that comes with that kit, and it was a large box and it was a small box. We had an invisible ink pen, a UV light, and then there were a series of locks, a hasp, it came with a USB drive and 2 hint cards. And then I also purchased 7 3-doodler pens. Okay, so this is kind of how it worked. This is one of the breakout sessions, and I'm going to show you, it's about a minute, a little over a minute clip, and this is the students actually participating in a breakout game, and hopefully my video will work.
Only if in the colors red, we
it says anything out, Riley? There's a UX screen that like.
Wait, 2 teeth is a combination.
That's 4. That's 24 in the book.
That was in the middle of the gameplay, and you saw a picture of the box and their goal. They had to break in that box within 45 minutes before the time ran out. And so there were a total of 7 locks, and they had to be able to solve the riddles to unlock those locks before the 7 minutes ran out. And then this next clip is really short, and you can see them unlock one of the actual locks.
19. Yeah, locked on. Okay, next one. Okay.
So that was them getting one of the first locks open. And one of the things I noticed is how engaged my students were. And so these are pictures from the second game that we did. So we did a series throughout the year. And this was based around the novel The Giver, once we finished reading that. And so this is one of my little kids, my students, and he never really likes to do anything in language arts. And so I thought I captured that perfect picture of him. He was excited and he was engaged for the first time. And so you can see everybody was kind of taking part, and that was one of the things that I was wanting to happen. Here, they're working on opening one of the 7 locks, like I said, required within the game. And then, of course, this particular class, they were able to escape, and we had a timer going. You can see they had 8 seconds left. So some of the classes, it really got down to the wire. I did have one class, they weren't able to do it because their teamwork was not the best, so they learned from that. So that was the first part of my grant. I wanted to engage my students and get them up and moving, involved with the content. The second part, we wanted to look at language, and we wrote poems, and we read Ted Kooser's Abandoned Farmhouse. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a great poem. And so we used that as a touch text for my students to write their own poetry rich with imagery, images that described them and captured their life. And so the kids had to come up with one image they wanted to use to create with the 3 doodler pens. So I've got some pictures. This little boy was trying to make a bat, and this little girl, I don't know if you can see, she's made a cross here in her hand, and she ended up making a necklace. And then here we have one, he's kind of holding it and using it to make a box. And here's some completed ones. This one was one of the ones that was actually 3D. It's kind of the outline of an airplane. I don't know if you can see that. And then this little girl did a mirror poem, and so she had the sun and night to represent her poem. But they were able to create something that represented the image that their poem created. Some pros, and I'm going to go real quick. This is I love the Breakout game. And if you've never tried it with your class, it's something I highly encourage. I only purchased one with the grant money. Had I had it to do over, I would have purchased all the Breakout games so I could have done small groups instead of necessarily the 3D pens. But it's fun for everyone, of course. It's adaptable to any subject area. And that's what I tell teachers in my building. And I invited other teachers to come in my room and watch it in action. And I said, let's figure out a way for you to use this in your classroom. It promotes collaboration and team building, which is one of my favorite. It develops problem solving and critical thinking skills, enhances communication skills. It challenges players to persevere. I'm going to be honest, they didn't always break out. I had one homeroom that didn't, and it was embarrassing to them that they were the only class that didn't break out. So it did teach, the next time we did it, they were able to do it. It builds inference skills. Students learn to work under pressure, and we all know that we have to take time tests at some point in our life, even though we don't like them. So I think that's great to expose students to that. It's student-centered, and it's great for inquiry-based learning at its best. The cons mainly come from the 3 doodler pens. And I brought some samples. I'll not get them out because I'm running out of time, but I wanted to try it out before I used it with my kids, and so my husband helped me the night before, and it took us like 3.5 hours to do a watermelon that was this big. The pens would jam, and they were rather expensive for them not to work as well as what they did, so I was very disappointed. They're about $100 a piece, and so I'd spent $700 to get 7 pens, and I only got my one box for like $100. So I would rather have had the boxes. And then they're advertised that they'll do wonderful 3D things, when in reality, unless you spend a lot of time with it, they're not really that 3D. You kind of have to trace things on paper, and then you have to put the sections together, and it is very time consuming. They work kind of like a hot glue gun, so I had to be very careful, monitor students to make sure they didn't get burnt, or they didn't get hurt. If it jammed, I had to unjam it or get someone to help me to unjam it. And when you've got a class of 26 kids and you're the only teacher in the room, that's kind of hard. So most of my cons came from the pen. I can't say enough good things about the breakout game because it was engaging and I didn't have any trouble with it. Some implications. To actively involve more students, I would love to have more than one breakout kit because I had one kit and we had to do whole class games. If I had more kits, I could do small groups and they could compete against each other in small groups. I would instruct students on how to open the locks and how to properly care for them. And to be honest with you, I didn't know there were that many kind of locks until I investigated this game. So some of the kids had never been exposed to those before, so they didn't know how to actually work the locks. And some of the locks have letters and the ink would rub off, and so then we would have to go back and put it on with a Sharpie so that the letters would stay on. Students need time to experiment with the 3-doodlers prior to attempting to create an actual product simply because they're cumbersome and they're not really easy to use unless you've used them before. And then I think multiple adults need to help with the supervision of 3-doodlers. I had 7th graders and yeah, they're teenagers, but I mean, it gets really hot and you can get burnt easily, so I was on my toes the day that we used those in my class, so. And any questions? And I know I went really fast and skipped quite a few things.